Hello and welcome to our weekly video on YouTube. Have you ever been part of a conversation where midway you've wanted to get up and leave the conversation because you've started to feel that your voice, your opinion is not going to be heard, respected, and valued in that space? I don't know about you, but I have been part of many of those situations and conversations before. And all this while, I always had assumptions that it was because the other person did not value or respect me. While part of those assumptions might be true, one thing that I realized very recently and is an issue that I really want to talk about today is also that we tend to feel that way in conversations many times because it's our own unconscious biases and preferences that creep up and become our own defenses. As human beings, it's natural for all of us to be attached to a certain way of living, to be attached to a certain way of thinking, to have preferences or biases towards a certain community of people. But what happens is when we are unconscious of the fact that we are partial and we are biased, those unconscious biases and preferences creep up and become walls in our relationships. This not only affects our relationships, but it also affects our ability to make effective decisions, and it also affects our ability to learn, grow, and evolve on a personal and professional level. Recently, I was at Dehradun for a workshop. It was a 1.5 day workshop, and so I was staying in the campus of that university where I was conducting the workshop. For all my meals, I would go to their mess. So during the lunch hour, there was this one old professor. He was not a part of our training group, but he was working in that university, a very senior professor. He happened to join us in the table. He started with having a lot of conversations about his subject, about how important it is for students to do their PhDs, and then the chat just went on and it was pretty one-sided. So after a while, I kind of lost interest in that conversation. But because we were in a group, I found it easy to excuse myself and move away from that table. Now, the next morning, when I went to the mess for breakfast, I saw this gentleman walk through the door. And the moment I saw him, I had an immediate automatic thought in my mind that, oh my God, I hope he doesn't come and join me on the table. And well, my fears did come true because there was nobody else in that room. So he got his plate, he put his stuff on his plate, and he came and joined me on my table. And the moment he sat and said good morning, and I smiled and I said a good morning, but in my mind, my thought was, oh my God, I am now trapped because I have to listen to this gentleman and I can't even excuse myself. Well, my fears did come true. He started by having conversations about subjects that I was completely clueless. He started by speaking about his experiences of the last 50 years of teaching, of doctorate, of PhD, of how students should behave, of how students are not very responsive these days, all sorts of things. And I kept listening to him. At least I pretended to listen to him. After a point, he stopped and asked me, so why are you here? What are you doing here? And I said to the gentleman that I'm a life skills trainer and coach, and I'm here to train people on life management skills. And I saw a very sarcastic smile on his face, and I could almost read what was going on in his mind. And he said, okay, what are some of the other academic institutions where you've done similar workshops? And I gave him some of the names. And then he asked me, have you done a workshop for this particular institution? And it was one of the very reputed institutions in the country. And I said, no. And he said, you will never be able to get in there. Even if you go with a good, solid proposal, they're going to reject you. Now, by this time, I was getting really, really agitated. But of course, I pretended to keep a straight face and I pretended to smile and listen to him. And I said, that's interesting. Tell me more. And he started to say that, in that institution, whenever the director has a proposal, he does not make decisions on his own. He takes the proposal to his team, which is his senior members, his faculty members, who are very, very intellectual. They're subject matter experts. Most of them are double doctorates, and he said that with a lot of pride. And he said they all assemble in a room, and the director takes the proposal, the idea to them. And like a parliament house, like an open house, there's one group of people who speak for the proposal, in favor of the proposal, and there's another group of people who speak against it. And it seems they debate it out, they argue about all the pros and the cons, and they trash out the proposal. And so most of the proposals that go into that room get trashed out and they never get implemented. Hardly a few proposals, even if they do get implemented, they will never be in the original form that the director had taken into the room. They talk about it, they argue, they debate, they refine the proposal until it comes to a point where everyone collectively feels that yes, this idea or this decision will be beneficial, useful for all of us, and it's only then a decision is made. So anybody like you, when you just go with a proposal, the chances are that you will get rejected. And as he was saying all this, I was totally not in agreement with his thought process and this way of making decisions. So in my mind, I was already having my defensive thoughts, and I said to myself, I don't even want to be there. I don't even want to go into a space where my work is not valued. Why would I even want to go there? And I had all of these thoughts going on in my mind. And then suddenly, he seemed to notice that, and he said, I can see from your face that you're not liking what I'm saying, but I just want to clarify one thing, that this is not about ego problems. It's not that the members in the room have a lot of ego. It's just that they feel that whenever a decision is made, a decision that's going to impact more than just the director himself, it's going to impact the entire organization, that idea, that proposal needs to be viewed from multiple perspectives. Now, there are many ways of making a decision like that, but the way that that institute adopts is to trash it out, to debate it out, to argue, and to come up with a very refined solution or an idea. And then our conversation ended there, and we left the table for our respective days ahead. But something in me had shifted, and I became aware, possibly for the first time, right from the time that gentleman had walked into the room, I had begun to unconsciously judge him. Because I had met him briefly a day earlier and I did not subscribe to his thought process about education, his thought process about how students should behave, how students should be developed, because my ideas were contrary to his way of thinking and his way of expression. I did not subscribe to his thought process, and because of which unconsciously my biases creeped up and I kind of developed, I wouldn't say a dislike, but I was not very open to listening to him. And therefore, by the end of the conversation, my biases became so strong that it was evident on my face. How do we develop our biases? Our biases, our preferences are usually a product of our belief systems. And our belief systems are something that we develop based on our past experiences. And I realized that while I may be having my own biases and preferences to certain things and certain way of life, they are not the universal right way. It may be right for me, but not necessarily it is the right way for everyone else. That was a very important realization that I had on that day. And that's why I was inspired to make this video for you, to invite you to look at what are the unconscious biases and preferences that you have that emerge without even your knowing and that become a part of your relationships and your conversations that do not allow you to be open to another point of view. But for a start on how to manage unconscious bias, two things are very important. Step one, do a good self-check, a good self-introspection, and become aware of your unconscious preferences and biases. These biases have kept cropping up from time to time. So recall those difficult conversations that you've had in the past and look at what are your unconscious biases that have stopped you from being open to another person. The moment you become aware of your biases, you are able to loosen their grip on you. So you may subscribe to a certain way of thinking and being, but you are now open to the possibility that if a person has a contrary way of living and being, a thought or an idea that is completely contrary from what I believe in, that can also be right. So just being open to that possibility. You don't have to agree with them, but being open to that possibility. That's the first step, and that happens with awareness, becoming aware of your unconscious bias. And the second step is, once you know what your biases are, ensure that you don't allow them in your decision making process. If you have to make decisions that only concern your life, then that's completely okay, even if it's biased. But if your decisions are going to impact a larger group of people, an organization, a team, or even your kids, it's important to not allow your personal biases and preferences to interfere with the decision making process, so that you can be fair as a leader, as a person in the seat of authority, and just as a human being. So try it out and let me know what you think. Until then, wishing you all the best. We'll meet again next week.